Do you want to say hi, Big up there? Say hello. Who's this? Who's this gorgeous girl? Thank you. Want to say hi to the camera? And snuggle back. There you go. Good girl. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video, and welcome back to my living room floor because I'm still arranging the office. I have just had to take like a week off to just sleep in bed because I have been so ill. I don't know what it was. It wasn't like a regular cold or flu or anything. It was just, I felt awful for a full week. So now that I am better, I thought I would do something a little bit different. Sorry, Kyra's here, by the way, if you can hear her snorting and sniffling in the background. She's probably going to pop in a little bit. You can just see her back in the corner of the video at the minute. So I'm going to do something a little bit different today, something a little bit relaxed. We are going to be talking about Rebecca Humphries' book, Why Did You Stay? And this is, unusually for me on this channel, a really positive review. I think this book is absolutely fantastic. This is her, essentially kind of like a memoir of her time being in an abusive relationship with a certain famous-ish, I guess, famous, but I don't give him credit, comedian, and how he very publicly cheated on her. It turns out that had been happening over and over many times throughout their relationship, and she kind of recounts through this book the reasons why she stayed in, honestly, a terrible, unhealthy, abusive relationship for so long, and then how she finally got the courage to leave and how she healed and grew from that. The comedian who Rebecca does not name throughout this book, and we are not going to name in this video because why give him any more publicity? He does not deserve it. Rebecca is the one who deserves all the credit here. His behaviour throughout the relationship was absolutely abusive and completely toxic. He would constantly put her down, belittle her, undermine her confidence, and he was just an absolutely awful person. And having been in an abusive relationship myself, being a survivor, having finally got out, I understand why so many people are like, but why did you stay for so long? And it's a question that I think us survivors do have to kind of battle with ourselves, because we put a lot of blame on ourselves, saying like, well, why didn't I see the signs sooner? Why didn't I have more self-worth? Why didn't I leave when he did this or did this or did this? You know, why did I keep going back? And I don't think there's any one reason for any of us. And Rebecca does a really good job of exploring her reasons for staying for so long. And quite a few of them resonated with me and why I stayed for so long. Thankfully, not as long as she did. But I have my own reasons as well. Different people will have different reasons to me, to Rebecca. They will have their own reasons. But I do feel that while it's important not to blame ourselves as the victims or to victim blame others by saying like, well, why did you stay, in that kind of tone, in that kind of judgmental tone, as though it's somehow our fault, I do think it's important to be self-reflective and be like, for ourselves and to ourselves, well, why did I stay? What were the warning signs I should have seen sooner? What were the red flags in their behaviour that I should have taken action kind of against or in response to? What was I lacking in terms of self-confidence and self-assuredness that I can now work on and build on and be better? How can I make sure this doesn't happen to me again? How can I heal from this and come out of this stronger? I think that kind of self-reflection is a really important thing for our healing and our growth. And like I say, Rebecca does a really good job of examining that for herself in this book in a way that I think will be really relatable for so many people, and in a way that I think is quite educational and eye-opening for people who haven't been through this themselves. So I don't have a script for this video. I thought I would just do something that I haven't done in a very long time. And that is, I have certain passages highlighted in this. As I was going through, I was like making little notes about bits that stood out to me and that I really liked. And I figured what we would do today is literally just flick through this, pick out a few of the bits that I highlighted and talk about them off the cuff, you know? Kind of get some of my raw, unfiltered thoughts. I do have, I highlighted this bit in particular though from about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the book, because I think this is a really good place to start. and I want to cover this first. Also, sorry if I'm not too articulate today. I have not been speaking to humans for, a week now, and I feel like I've forgotten how to talk. I've just been stuck in the house with Kyra, and also my throat is still a little sore and shaky, so please excuse that as we go forward, and thank you for your patience. So this short chapter, about 3/4 of the way into the book, begins by discussing abusive relationships that she'd seen in the past on TV and in the media, and how that influenced her perception of what an abusive relationship was before she herself was in one. So this in particular might go over the heads of a few of you American and non-UK viewers, but bear with me. She says, Little Mo from EastEnders was probably my formative understanding of what abuse looks like, and despite my better judgment, is still my inbuilt cultural benchmark of an abuse victim. That, when all's said and done, I cannot relate to. So Little Mo was also probably one of my kind of formative building blocks for what abuse looked like as well. And it was an iconic bit of TV. Little Mo was one of the Slater sisters introduced to EastEnders in about, 2000, something like that. And she was the quiet one. She was the kind one. She was very reserved. And she had this husband, Trevor, who was an absolute piece of crap. And he was violent. There's this absolutely harrowing scene that I still remember from being a kid where he raped her on the bathroom floor. And eventually this all culminated in basically her turning around one day and whacking him with an iron. And I think at that point the whole country was cheering her on, because we'd all seen this wonderful, albeit fictional woman being reduced to an absolute mess by a monster of a man. And while it's nice to see an abuser getting their comeuppance like that, as Rebecca writes in this book, she didn't relate to it. And I didn't relate to it either, because my abuser wasn't often outwardly violent like that. I mean, there were times when he was, but most of the abuse was more subtle, so the outside world couldn't see it. Rebecca goes on to write that these images, as in what she saw of abusive relationships in pop culture, are blatant, outwardly violent. Pop culture taught me subtlety does not exist in these matters. They can't represent years of nuance or the daily gradual lowering of expectations until the best you can wish for yourself is for them to finish their drink with another woman on your birthday quickly. It's made clear that abuse doesn't happen to women like me, confident women who can crack jokes, can lead, can make decisions. I am that woman. Or I was, at points. Pop culture told me that by identifying as an abuse victim, I'm being dramatic, that I'm actually fine. Those women have it so much worse. It's unintentionally encouraged me to minimize my suffering as an overreaction. And here's the thing. If victims are being told they're not victims of abuse, does that mean perpetrators are being told that what they're doing isn't abusive? I think yes. There's every chance they've been conditioned to genuinely think how they're behaving is normal. And again, I have to agree with this. And this was something that I struggled with in my own relationship because I didn't identify it as abuse. You know, the way he would belittle me and put me down, the way I felt I was constantly walking on eggshells. You know, it's like, well, he wasn't hitting me every day, so it couldn't be abuse. You know? He'd never been sexually violent with me, so it couldn't be abuse. But it was. And then on the times when he did get violent, when there would be things thrown at me, when he would push me to the ground and kick me, when he threw he threw a bag with my work laptop and all my camera and everything in it, like he would throw that across the house, and, you know, he would block me in rooms and not allow me to leave. He would get up in my face, like screaming at me, and when I would try and push past him to get out of the room, he would call me the violent one. He'd be like, see what you've done now, see what you've done. But overall, he wasn't what I would describe as a violent man. He just used violence occasionally. So it wasn't abuse. And that's kind of the problem. So when I finally got the courage to leave him, that was a whole thing. A lot of death threats. It was pretty bad. And then I finally got the courage to call what he'd done to me abusive. And again, more death threats, more threats from him in general. He was going to expose private images of me and all this sort of thing. And he was telling me he was going to kill me, and I was petrified for my life. And that was kind of when, some of my family stepped up and really helped me, which was fantastic, wonderful, appreciate them for that a lot. But one of the things that unintentionally kind of made things a bit difficult for me was my sister-in-law recommended me this book, which is one that they have recommended. She's a GP, and it's one that she was like, yeah, so when we have victims of domestic violence at the doctors, we recommend this book to them. We've got a few copies to give them. At my church, this is one that we recommend to people. And I got it and I read it, and I was like, this is not Johnny. Johnny is none of these things represented in this book. And it was very much this idea that an abuser is a working class guy who comes home and he's drunk and he beats his wife. And while they were trying to help women with this book, it really painted abuse as this one-dimensional thing that was very overtly violent, and only a certain type of man did it, and only a certain type of woman suffered from it. And I was like, this isn't my experience. And it got me doubting myself and thinking, well, maybe I wasn't really abused. Maybe Johnny's right. Maybe I am absolutely crazy and I'm making this all up in my head and it's all my fault. Maybe I'm the one in the wrong. And it really, really started to do some damage in my head. It wasn't until I read Dr. Ramani Dasavala's book, Should I Stay or Should I Go?, about narcissistic abuse, that I realised, oh, yeah, this is exactly what I've been through, and it is abuse. I'm not the crazy one here. He was a bad man. You know, a lot of people don't like the term narcissistic abuse because they think it's ableist against people with narcissism, but as I've always said in my videos, like, not all narcissists are abusers, but similarly, not all abusers are narcissistic abusers. Keep be snoring in the background quite loudly, sorry. Narcissistic abuse is a term which is used to describe a very specific kind of abuse, and I think it's important to use that term and to educate people about it, because only when I heard that and found out about it did I actually get access to the resources that I needed. And I'm going to keep talking about it and using that term because my responsibility is to help other victims of abuse. I need to make sure other victims and survivors can find the resources that they need. Honestly, that's all I care about. And I spoke to my therapist about this quite a lot because I was getting a lot of comments at one point from people saying narcissistic abuse isn't real. Like, you can't say this. You're victimizing us by talking about your experiences. And to this day, I still get long emails from people being like, narcissistic abuse isn't real. I spoke to my therapist about this because I was like, well, what if they're right? What if I'm the bad person for talking about this? And she was like, well, no, because the people saying that are narcissistic abusers in themselves, and they are trying to re-victimize you and shame you into silence. You have every right to use that term. It is a recognized term amongst therapists, and when your goal is to direct people to resources that are going to help them, you should keep using it. So I will, and I am. Rebecca doesn't use that term in this book, but I would argue that that is exactly the kind of abuse she was facing. Her ex-partner, just like mine, was so charming on the outside. You know, you can read whole passages of him charming big crowds of people going on about how lovely and charismatic he is, how funny he is, how sweet he is. And yeah, they absolutely are. And that's, again, one of the reasons why you stay. Because they are so lovely and charming. They can absolutely love bomb you when they need and make you feel like the most special person in the world, but they can also just take it away like that. You know, they can go, like, I know Johnny in particular would go from, like, I've never met anyone like you. You're the smartest person I've ever met. You're the most beautiful girl I've ever dated. You're so kind, you're so lovely. I've never met anyone like you. I've never felt this way before. Like, with the others, it wasn't the same. This is so different. He would go from that 1 minute to then his mood would switch and he would be going on about how I'm crazy, I'm awful, I'm selfish, I'm insecure. It's a good job that he loves me because no one else ever will. And they mess with your self-image and how you view yourself and the world around you so much. Here we go. The first bit I actually highlighted in this book is talking about exactly that. So this is where they've been dating like barely any time, and he's been absolutely charming her and love bombing her, taking her off on fancy holidays, taking her to all these fancy things, these big events, introducing her to people, and eventually, like, after no time at all, he's like, marry me. No, that's silly. Just move in with me. And so she does, because she's swept up in it all. And it gets her sucked in, and it makes her feel like she needs to be grateful for something, and it makes her reliant on him, to be honest. But she says, I look at him, galvanized by this person who can be bold enough to know exactly what they want and ask for it, amazed that what they want is me. I've been bombed with love, and it's everything I was ever promised. And even though a little voice somewhere inside me says you aren't compatible, I shake it off, because the fact that I shouldn't be doing it is half the fun. It's irresponsible, unsensible, it's the opposite of me, and thank F for that. Again, that's exactly how Johnny made me feel sometimes. Another thing that a lot of abusers do that Rebecca writes about and that I experienced myself is this concept of flipping around who did what wrong. So a lot of people use the acronym DARVO, which is like deny, attack, reverse, victim and offender, something like that. It's something that a certain person who's been harassing me on YouTube for like 5 years continues to do. It's something Johnny used to do a lot, and it's something Rebecca writes about her ex doing as well. So in this chapter of the book, she talks about the time where she caught him messaging an ex called Mia, who, was it an ex, I think? So she caught him messaging another woman called Mia, and it was like she was using his laptop, and then a bunch of messages popped up from her, and they were like arranging to meet behind her back, and they were sexting each other and all that sort of thing. And obviously that's cheating on his part. That's the betrayal on his part, right? But no, he turns it round to be about her. She says, I can't put my finger on when exactly, but at some point not long after the Mia debacle, the crime went from him sending explicit messages to me having read them. It became, what were you doing spying on my Facebook anyway, which quickly became separate laptops and passcodes, and the importance of privacy. Eventually the whole thing turned into, it was only a few messages on Facebook anyway. I'd said I felt like I shouldn't trust him, and he'd asked if I'm seriously still paranoid because of some messages he can barely even remember, and when am I gonna get over it? It's like they all read from the same script. This is exactly what Johnny would do. He would tell me stories of him, like, cheating on his last ex over and over and over, and somehow I still went into it thinking, well, it'll be different with me. And it wasn't. The amount of times I caught him messaging other people, the final straw for me was when I found a hard drive of his. I was borrowing it to copy some photos from an SD card to my laptop. It was a whole thing. So I was borrowing his hard drive, and on it I found tens, not joking, tens of thousands of photos of him having sex with other people. Just like over and over. And again, he's there with his penis in somebody else's mouth, but I'm the one in the wrong because I saw them. That's what happened here. That's what happened in real life. This is what abusers do. They make you feel like it's a bigger crime that you found out what they'd done than what they did in the first place. It's a typical case of they're not sorry what they did, they're sorry they got caught. But it's not that they're just sorry they got caught, they're angry at you for catching them. It becomes your fault. You're the one in the wrong for catching them. As a kind of point of comparison of what happens in what I would hope is a more healthy relationship, me and Kieran have had one argument in like the 2 years we've been together, and it was because I'm trying to explain this right. Neither of us really did anything wrong, but neither of us handled it in the best way either, if that makes sense. So he'd gone out for drinks with some work colleagues one night, but he hadn't told me about it, and I found out like 2 weeks later, and I was like, wait, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Why didn't you tell me you were there? And my overactive brain was like, oh my god, he's hiding something. And I was very upset by it. In reality, it just wasn't really a big momentous thing for him, so it completely slipped his mind. But in my head, I was like, oh my god, he's lying to me, he must be cheating, he's hiding things, because that's what Johnny had done in the past, so that's where my brain went. And instead of Kieran turning around and being like, oh, you're overreacting, you're being so stupid, blah, 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 blah. This is your fault for finding out I was even there, like Johnny would have, like the ex in this book would have, he, being an emotionally mature adult, was like, you know what, I am so sorry I didn't tell you. I never meant to deceive you. This is not going to happen again. Let's talk through why I didn't communicate properly and how I can do better, and I want to rebuild our trust. Let me reassure you. It was amazing. Like, he's a wonderful man. And he's just so emotionally stable and healthy, and that's exactly what I've needed for such a long time. And even though we had that, like, one night of upset, and then, like, a week later I was, like, freaking out about it, and I had another little cry, we talked about it then too, and then it's been fixed. Everything's fine. He communicates with me now. I'm not paranoid or worried or anything. It's just, everything's very nice. I feel like there's a way to handle breaches of trust, if that makes sense, in a way that can be healthy and propel your relationship forward. It doesn't have to be destructive and blaming each other. Another example of this comes in the chapter which she really interestingly titles I Stayed Because I'm Psychotic. Not because she actually is, but because that's what he used to call her, and that's what he made her believe she was. So in this chapter, she goes to a hell of a lot of effort. She puts on a beautiful dress, she's wearing pretty underwear, she does her hair, her makeup, she cooks him his favourite dinner, and then he comes in and he just craps all over it. He tells her food sounds horrible, he is disrespectful, he's rude, he acts like he doesn't want to be there, and she just understandably loses it. She has gone to all of this effort to try and create this wonderful, intimate moment between them so they can connect, and he's just crapping all over it. And she literally starts crying. She drops the dish that she's made on the floor and it shatters, and she is crying. She's going, "Why don't you want me? Why don't you want me? You're such a C word." And I think when you've seen this has had months of abuse, of build-up to get to this point, it's understandable why she feels this way. I actually think what she's experiencing here is a completely normal reaction to the way she's been treated. But of course, he turns it round to this being her fault. She's the crazy one. She's psychotic. She's overreacting. She's over-emotional. Oh my god, she's the one who's ruined the date by smashing the dish and crying and shouting and swearing for no reason, right? Except it's not for no reason, but he won't acknowledge that. He calls her completely mental and says she's so sensitive and a bunch of other things like that, completely putting her down and undermining her feelings. And she starts to believe it. She says, "Yeah, I know. I indicate with my hands the mess, us being on the floor, the whole situation, as if to say, I can see it all, I have eyes, I know this is my fault, and I'm feeling hot again. Christ, why do I have to be so offended by everything?" So you can see she's really internalizing these things he's saying to her. She is being gaslit into believing that she is the crazy one. She is the problem. Her and her emotions can't be trusted. They're so out of control. And again, it's exactly what I experienced. She does talk about gaslighting in one of the chapters where she's reflecting on why she left, and afterwards she goes to see a therapist and she starts learning, the words for everything she experienced, just like I did from Dr. Amani and the other therapists out there who are talking about narcissistic abuse. So in this, she learns a bit about gaslighting, and she says, "Abuse feels like an epic inflammatory word, and this stuff, it was so everyday. Like being told I'm making stuff up when I was sure I was right. Being told I always do something. Being love-bombed with presents and niceness because he felt bad or said something horrible. I'd even thought that one was meant to be a nice thing. It had felt bloody nice. That dopamine. It's like someone's thrown you out of a 15-story window and then caught you an inch above the pavement. It's such a rush that even when the threat of falling inevitably comes back around, you hang in there if it means getting caught like that again." It's exactly what I experienced, because the goods are so good that you kind of put up with the lows being so low, because you're just trying to do anything to grasp back a little bit of those good moments. You want those highs again. You want him to tell you that you're smart, you're beautiful, you're pretty, you're special, blah, 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 blah. You want to be treated well. You want him to sing songs to you and make jokes, and, you deal with the crappy stuff because you're trying to just get a little grasp of that good high again, But anyway, so her therapist says, so gaslighting is calling into question somebody's mental state, making them question themselves. It's a very cruel thing to do. Very cruel. Because of course when people don't trust their own mental state, they often act erratically out of fear that they're insane. This is exactly what I experienced too. And then the perpetrator sees the behaviour and feels justified in calling it out as mental or psychotic, and the victim feels as though the perpetrator's right. It's a cycle that over time means the perpetrator can begin to essentially write the story of whatever relationship it is, rub out events, do whatever they like. Emotional abuse. It also includes things like being insulted, sworn at, making someone feel intimidated or bullying them, putting them down, isolating them from other people. It's clever, really. There aren't any clear physical signs like a black eye or an arm in a sling, but the signs are there if you look hard enough, like a person being vacant or their personality being shaved down. These people are damaged. They're looking for help and they can't accept it, meaning the abusers. At their core, they don't value themselves enough. It's sad, really. Not excusable, but not always intentional. And again, this is exactly what I experienced. Johnny would often, with me, use the fact that I'm on an anti-anxiety medication. He would use that against me and be like, your medication's wrong. You're only acting like this because you're on the wrong medication. You're on the wrong dose. You didn't... If I was upset with him for doing something like, you know, talking to other women, if I was upset with him for something like, you know, hitting on his ex again, flirting with other women, lying to me about something, hurting me, calling me names, it was always like, why are you acting like this? Is it your medication? You're crazy, you're insane, you're... In this chapter here, they're having an argument over dinner at a restaurant, and she says, I've started to cry again. I tried to give the poor waiter a glance that says, it's okay, that says, this is normal for us. I tried to make it less embarrassing for the guy, for myself, for him, for us all, because that's usually my forte. I can't look up with wet eyes at yet another member of the hospitality industry that's interrupted a low-voiced argument over dinner. So damn relatable. She ends up asking him, do you even like me? Of course I like you. You say it like it's obvious, but you behave like you don't at all. I'm sorry, don't leave, don't. Then why'd you talk to me like that? Like a 5-star arsehole? I don't know, because I'm a C-word. You're so cruel. Sometimes I feel like you keep me here just to have something following you around. Like I'm your dog, shaking in the corner. Something you can take things out on when you feel crap about yourself. Can kick or whatever. Don't ever say that to me. He looks at me square in the face, his voice leaden. I would never, ever hit you. And this goes back to like what we were saying right near the beginning, where she was talking about if victims are being told they're not victims of abuse, does this mean perpetrators are being told that what they're doing isn't abusive? And I feel like that's very much on display in that little scene there, because he's drawing this line. He's like, abuse is okay as long as it's not violent. Because in his mind, what he's doing isn't abusive. He's just being himself, right? But the behaviour is abusive, whether it's violent or not. He doesn't get to be self-righteous because, well, you know, I'd never hit you, I'd never be violent. Doesn't matter, you're destroying her from the inside. It doesn't matter if you're not physically leaving bruises, you're still doing damage. It's interesting because in the next page she writes, she basically says that she realises that he's a damaged person. And you know what's interesting? I think that sometimes abusers will almost weaponise that about themselves. So Johnny did it a lot as well. He would be like, I'm so sorry, like, you need to forgive me for doing this, this or this. It's because I'm an alcoholic. It's because I'm insecure about this. It's because I've got all these problems. And I'd be like, you know what, it's okay, that's not your fault. Let's work on this together. So I ended up, like, I would try and get him to have doctor's appointments so he could help with the alcohol abuse, and nothing. He wouldn't go. So I would read books on dealing with alcohol addiction and substance abuse, and because he would also take a crap ton of drugs and stuff like that. It was terrible. I read books on like how to help people who are struggling with that. I'd be like, okay, well, like, you know, I can help you cut down here and here. I can do this to support you. I can do this. I read books on good communication within a relationship. I read books trying to fix everything. I would put these little like plans in place for us and be like, oh, we can talk at these times. If we do these things when we communicate, things are going to get better. I would send him stuff to read. I would read like these 400-page books and summarize them into bullet points and be like, all you have to do is read like this page, and if you can understand it, we can talk about it, and then we can work on this. And he just wouldn't. He wouldn't do any of it. He liked being able to say he was an alcoholic because it gave him an excuse to do bad things, but he didn't actually want to change. I bet to this day he's still on his bottle of wine a night and then however many whiskies afterwards. It's... These things are hard to talk about because, like, obviously you can't blame someone for an addiction. You absolutely can't at all. And, like, some of my best friends have had substance abuse problems before and are completely sober now. And I have so much respect for them, for how much work they constantly put into themselves and their lives and keeping themselves healthy and sober and being good people. They don't allow those issues to harm themselves or other people anymore. They've put that work in, and I think that's really, really commendable. But that's not what Johnny was doing. He wasn't doing any work. He was weaponizing his problems, if that makes sense. And that's what you can see the ex doing in this as well. He would almost like weaponize the flaws he realized he had. Like, and it's interesting here because Rebecca writes, a damaged person can never stop needing someone to rely on. And look, I may not be able to get an acting job. I may not have seen my family since last year. But with this man, the one whimpering on the other side of the bistro set, I am a necessity. She says to him, this is a really bad relationship. I know, he says, as if to say you have no idea. Well, I don't want that. I don't want to argue my life away. We won't. We'll work on it, make it better. It's a grassroots thing. You have to start respecting me. Yeah, understood. I've never seen him so compliant. Stop calling me things like mental. Okay, then you have to stop nagging me about it. It's only nagging if you have to ask more than once. All right. This is, again, so reminiscent of so many of the conversations that me and Johnny used to have. It was like he would admit that he has a problem. I would say, okay, this is how we need to fix it. And he'd be like, fine, we'll do it. And then it'd always turn around to, but you also have this problem and it's a bigger problem and you need to sort that first. She says, I watch him look up at the sky in relief, then put his head in his hands and curl into a ball, like I've rescued him from his anguish. Everything's all right. Things are different now, because now I have the power. I go over and kneel in front of him. It's okay. I move his hair out of his face. I'm here. Except, of course, she doesn't really have the power. You never do in these types of relationships. It's all just an act on their part to get you to do what they want. And even immediately after he's, like, essentially got her back on side and stopped her from leaving, he's back to twisting the narrative again, changing events, like what just happened didn't actually happen. On the way I tell him I'm so glad it all worked out. It shows we're a strong team. He kicks a Diet Coke can and says, all right. And I get it, because I am going on a bit now. The thing that's bad about things like earlier, I tell him, is that by saying you just want to have fun in response to my being there, that implies you think I'm like some fun sponge, and that's what really hurt. Also something Johnny used to say to me, it's more fun when I'm not there than... I never said that. You did, you literally said that. I just want to have fun for once. Alright, maybe I did, but I didn't say it like that, not in that tone. I'm about to protest when we're interrupted. And then again, she's back to making excuses for him because, well, he's not physically violent, so he can't be that bad. What he's doing can't be abuse, right? She says, I like that there are no bruises on my body or crusty blood in the corner of my mouth. He still makes me laugh. I've nothing to moan about, no reason to cry all the time and make drama out of pizzas. I know how it can be with us too. And then she's back to chasing those highs again and thinking that she's the crazy one. She's the one who causes all the problems. She's, the problem. Rebecca also addresses the fact that after the final straw for her breaking up with the ex was the fact that he was publicly caught kissing his co-star, shall we say, on a TV competition program. Paparazzi caught them, splashed all over the newspapers. That's how it all came out that he'd been cheating. And then Rebecca had to make a statement about it, and it was a whole thing. And she says, since then, I've received hundreds of messages on Instagram, and about 15 of them are women who have come forward to tell me about a specific incident. Attempted kisses, invitations to hotel rooms, one-night stands. They're all informative, presented as gifts. And I think that's something you kind of find. Well, actually, there's two things to kind of touch on here. One is this idea of triangulation. So one of the things that narcissist abusers will do is they triangulate. So they'll never, for example, leave one relationship until they've got another one lined up. Or they'll be chatting with an ex while they're with you. They've always got to have kind of, someone else on the go, essentially. Let me go grab my other book and see if I can get a better definition for you. I think it's in this one, but don't hold me to that. This book is also a fantastic resource as well. This is the one that literally saved my life by Dr. Armani. It's Should I Stay or Should I Go? Surviving a Relationship with a Narcissist, and lifesaver. Seriously. Okay, I'm struggling to find the bit on triangulation that I need in this book, but I have just got a little definition online here that says, triangulation involves a narcissist intentionally introducing a third party, such as an ex-partner, a friend, or family member, into the relationship. This third party serves as a tool for the narcissist to create a sense of competition, jealousy, and insecurity within the victim. By constantly comparing the victim to the third party, the narcissist effectively undermines the victim's self-esteem and creates a constant state of tension and anxiety. This manipulation tactic allows the narcissist to maintain control over the victim as they become the primary source of validation and attention. It also often means that if you do actually leave them, then they've got someone else right there ready to go who's already in this cycle of abuse, essentially. One of the things that's really interesting is that in this book, Dr. Marnie points out that narcissists often hate being alone. They need others for admiration, so being alone is a challenge for them. She goes on to say that they're also notoriously bad at boundaries because they regulate their self-esteem through others, they maintain their relationships to get their needs met, and will frequently cross a line and violate a boundary because it makes them feel good in that moment. They lack empathy. They do not pause to reflect on how these chronic boundary violations make you feel as a partner. And also, there's a big pattern of these kinds of abusers cheating. Infidelity is a huge, huge problem amongst them. Dr. Armani says infidelity is a glaring extension of the boundary violations. Their need for admiration and novelty is so vast that they are wired to be unfaithful. Affairs are typically characterized by excitement, flattery, and superficial grandiosity. They can rationalize a morally questionable situation into a love story because they're so special and deserve to feel alive. That's what Johnny did. That's what the ex did constantly. And of course, when they've created this kind of competition and comparison, you start making those comparisons everywhere. Not only is it like, well, I'm not as pretty, smart, blah, 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 as this other person they're comparing me to, but you also start thinking, well, if they like him, why do I have a problem with this, and this thing that he does? If I have a problem and they don't, then maybe I'm the problem. Hey, so editing me just jumping in here, you'll have to excuse how smudgy and scruffy I'm looking at this point. But the other thing that I think is worth pointing out here is that, like, especially when they're triangulating and they've got kind of like someone else on the hook, someone else on their little roster, someone else that they're bringing in or that they immediately move on to, you might find yourself comparing, well, why do they treat them better than me? Why aren't they doing this to them like they are to me? And you'll find that, you know, maybe it's because you're comparing their discard phase with the love bombing stage they're doing on someone else. It's not that there's anything wrong with you, it's just that they're trying to put on this front that they once put on with you. They're putting that on now for another person. But they want you to look at it and think that it's your fault. They're treating this other person better because this other person's better than you, clearly. Therefore, you were the problem all along and you need to change. But that's not the reality. That's not how it is. It's not your fault. They're not actually treating this other person better. They just have a mask on with them. They're at a different point in their charm, abuse, discard cycle with them than they are with you. That's all. It is never your problem. But this is something that these types of abusers do. You know? So in this chapter, Rebecca talks about how the boyfriend, now ex, would often charm so many of her friends, like especially at parties and things like that. She says, I know for sure they see something in him, something that I'd once seen, and it's a sweet relief to watch them fall in love with it. These are good people. If they love him, then what the hell is my problem? And again, they use this superficial outward charm to kind of trick people into thinking that's the real them, and then it makes you question, like, the other sides of them that you've seen. Does that make sense? As the book gets closer to the moment where he publicly cheated on her, she was actually very, very paranoid about that happening in the first place. That is one thing she genuinely thought could happen when he went on that TV show, and she was worried about it. Coops is snoring away, bless her. She says, I want him to do well, I just don't want him to have an affair. I don't want to be shut out. I want to feel involved in some way so my weird paranoia doesn't kick in and this becomes effing unbearable. I don't know how to remind him without sounding like a nag or bringing him down and making this experience a drag, because it's amazing. She also acknowledges that, and this is something that I really, really experienced as well, which was a real struggle at the time. With the whole comparison thing, so obviously these kinds of abusers will compare you to other people, especially other women, but then you kind of start to get paranoid about that. So like with Johnny, flirting with so many other people, having sex with them, sexting with them, all this sort of thing, like, and directly comparing us. Like, he would be like, oh, you're more this than my ex, you're not as good as my ex, this ex said this, why don't you do this, you know, all that sort of thing. And I, at the time, completely misplaced all my anger and insecurity at these other women and other people that he was seeing, when really it should have been directed at him. You know, he was the one making the comparisons. It wasn't these other women's fault, but I mistakenly did blame them at the time. And Rebecca says she experienced the same thing. She says, it's not just her that I don't like. I've stopped liking all women. When I see any woman in that first second, I begin to weigh them up so quickly, it's like I'm using his actual eyes, his actual feelings. I can instantly identify who is safe and who is a threat, friends or enemies. Years of catching his glances at some woman and his looking straight through others have given me an inbuilt chart of his preferences and turn-offs. And that's the thing, they really do kind of like turn you against everyone to the point where it feels like you against the world, and they're the only one who is on your side. And even then, they're not always on your side, so you have to try and get them back on your side. Like, I remember when Johnny's ex reached out to me to try and warn me about him, and he threw an absolute fit. He started driving dangerously. He was screaming at me in the car, all because, like, she wanted to warn me and he didn't want that. I don't know, stuff's hard to talk about. She also asks the really important question, at what point does a series of rough patches become a cycle? And I think that's something that all of us who've been in that situation think about and try and ask ourselves. Towards the end of the relationship, she did start to feel desperate. In this story here, she says, he said all the usual stuff about being psychotic, which I appreciate. I have over the years tried asking nicely, convincing, seducing, giving him space, emotionally manipulating, disguised as asking nicely, shouting, asking nicely while crying, and demanding while scream crying. Tonight I was begging. It was a lot. It was desperate. And again, that is how you get in the end when you're just trying everything to just be treated like a basic human being by them. Oh, I was wrong earlier, sorry, she does bring up narcissism towards the end of the book, like we're talking last few pages. She says about her ex, I'd thought he was the centre of the actual universe for a long while, a thought propagated partially by his narcissistic behaviour. She then quotes someone else saying, narcissism is characterised by a grandiose sense of self-importance, a lack of empathy for others, and a need for excessive admiration, and the belief that one is unique and deserving of special treatment. Narcissists may show passion and charm in the early stages of dating, but for most narcissists, relationships are transactional. They lose interest in the relationship as the expectation for intimacy increases, or they feel they've conquered the challenge of securing a relationship. On a more practical level, I would add that you can tell if you're the partner of someone with narcissistic tendencies if your symptoms include feeling trapped in your own body, extreme helplessness, and as though you're slowly bleeding out. Now, this is a bit that I found really, really interesting, and I really liked this. This really made me think. She says, notice how I've worded my accusations, however. Narcissistic behaviour. Because I believe to diagnose someone as a full-blown narcissist is a bit like saying affairs with dancers are a curse. It makes everybody involved less accountable for their actions. And this is something that really, really got me thinking, because again, it got me thinking about the people who are like, don't use the phrase narcissistic abuse because it demonizes everyone with narcissism. But I think you can acknowledge that someone is a narcissistic abuser without saying, therefore, everyone with narcissism is an abuser, because that's not what it's saying. And it's also, as Rebecca's saying, not saying, therefore, they can't help it because they're a narcissist, so we should forgive it. It's not. It's simply describing their behaviour, but they still need to be held accountable for it. I don't know, language is a tough one, but I think, again, my priority is making sure we use the right terms so that people can be directed to the information that they need to keep them safe and healthy. That is my only concern, and that is my priority in talking about this stuff. So, yeah, I do like that Rebecca brought that up. I thought that was really good. This last part of the video, I just want to go back and talk about the bit she wrote about leaving the relationship, how she learnt from that, how she healed from that, how she's grown, what she's learned, all that sort of thing. Because I think this is the really, really important and really empowering parts of this book. I know I'm jumping about a little bit with this review, and it's not quite as like in-depth and chapter by chapter as I would normally do in my videos, but I kind of want to just pull out a few interesting bits and then kind of, without giving you kind of like the full story of the book, it's non-fiction, but you know what I mean. I think this is a book that I would encourage everyone to go out and read for themselves and just experience, because it is so eye-opening and inspiring, and honestly for me it was very, very relatable, and yeah, I would encourage everyone to go read it for themselves, which is why I'm being a little less in-depth than usual. So after she left the relationship, one of her friends, Theo, came to her, and they were saying that, so basically the ex hadn't liked Theo, and he had tried to essentially isolate Rebecca from them, and it had worked, because that's another thing these types of abusers do, they isolate you from your friends. So Theo says that they could see what was happening to Rebecca, but they didn't know how to express it or say it or help her, essentially. And they say, it was so insidious, the whole thing. I could see you being chipped away at, stopping wearing sequins, stopping singing at karaoke, and whenever I pointed out little things, I could feel them being dismissed as me overanalyzing or trying to find fault. And that's why abusers like this will try and isolate you from your friends and family, so people don't point out stuff like that, so they can't help you get away. So the abuser is the one who always remains in control. This was a really interesting little, I guess you could call it an analogy sort of thing that she kept coming back to, where she retells the story of Cassandra from Greek mythology. So Rebecca writes, in Greek mythology, Cassandra was a princess of Troy. The sun god Apollo promised her the gift of prophecy if she accepted his sexual advances. She agreed at first, but then changed her mind, so Apollo put a curse on her. She could see the future, see impending doom, her family's and her own death, but nobody would ever believe her. In some versions, Cassandra never accepted Apollo's advances, and he cursed her for rejecting him. In some, she was asleep when he tried to have sex with her. In one, Apollo curses her by spitting in her mouth. In all versions, everyone believed she was either a liar or insane. She compares this to kind of modern day by saying, right or wrong, all people tend to not take women seriously, especially when that woman is me. And I do think that is sadly so, so true, and it's why so many abusers have got away with it for so long, because people simply don't believe women enough. We're constantly questioned. If we say something's happened to us, we get a million questions back. Yeah, but did it really happen like that? Yeah, but what did you do to lead them on? Yeah, but did you deserve it? What were you wearing? Where were you? Why were you there? People don't want to believe women. It's as simple as that. Later on, Rebecca comes back to this and she says, something occurs to me about the myth of Cassandra. Maybe I've missed the point. Maybe it wasn't that she was never believed. Maybe the point is she knew she wouldn't be, but chose to speak the truth anyway, because if she didn't, something worse might happen than being called a liar. When that occurs to me, safety doesn't feel so safe anymore. Safety feels like yielding. Safety feels like seeing a significant opportunity in my life to assert the person I am, and opting instead to be passive. And so instead she decides to be brave and share her story of the abuse she faced online and through this book. And I think that is so inspiring and it's so wonderful. And that's kind of the thing, isn't it? Even if women aren't believed, that doesn't mean we should stop speaking out, because eventually things are going to have to change. People are going to have to start believing us women when there's so damn many of us with so many stories that are similar. I am so proud of everyone who has spoken up. People like Rebecca Humphries, who aren't afraid to speak about their experiences and what happened to them and how they have come out of this so strong and brave, and now they're doing everything they can to help other victims. I think that's wonderful.
Hey, gorgeous girl. How you doing? Hey. Careful.
But that's why I want to keep speaking out. And
Okay.
got a snack.
All right, come on.
But that's why I want to keep speaking out and using my platform to amplify not only my own voice, but the voices of others, women like Rebecca Humphries and so many others who have been through the same thing. Because it doesn't matter if not everyone believes us. It doesn't matter if you get these people who are like, narcissistic abuse isn't real. They don't matter. What matters is that there are going to be some people who believe us. There are going to be some people who relate. There are going to be some people who hear our stories and know that they can get out too. That's who I'm making these videos for. That's who matters to me. And that's why it's so important that we keep speaking up, regardless of whether we're believed at first or not. You enjoyed that, baby? It's good meat. Yeah? Good job. Rebecca herself wrote that once she spoke up, she says, "I'm no longer a supporting character in this narrative. I am the lead, and what's more, I wrote the script." She speaks of so many people, especially women, reaching out to her to say they've been through the same thing, and this is exactly what I experienced the first time I spoke out about my experiences too, and it's horrible to know that other people have been through the same thing, but at the same time, that feeling of solidarity, of knowing that you're not alone. Cooby, please tell me you didn't just break the light, baby. Okay, we're good. Everything's fine, don't you worry. I think you just hit the button with your bum. But that feeling of solidarity, of knowing that you're not alone, can be so comforting and so empowering. And also knowing that you're reaching other people and helping them feel empowered too. I think that's such an important thing to do. So again, Rebecca had people messaging her, like she says, "A teacher at a girls' school has replied to my statement on Twitter, letting me know that she got rid of her lesson plan this morning and went through my statement with the girls instead, engaging them in discussion in the hope they would begin to consider their own worth." Sorry, this is a really important thing, and Kyra's being very, very cute and, like, leaning into the microphone. Oh my god. Okay, sorry. Let me read that for you again. "A teacher at a girls' school has replied to my statement on Twitter, letting me know she got rid of her lesson plan this morning and went through my statement with the girls instead, engaging them in discussion in the hope they would begin to consider their own worth," which is fantastic. Her aunt texted her and said, "One of the young teaching assistants said in the staff room today that she'd left her mean boyfriend this morning because of a statement from a nice woman named Rebecca Humphries." Later she says, "My agent has forwarded emails sent to the agency from women trying to get in touch, telling me they'd read what I said and realised they were right to leave their partners all those years ago. They'd still thought they were crazy until they'd read what I had to say." Until you start speaking about it, I don't think you realise just how many of us there are who have been through this or something similar. Annoyingly though, the ex is still, to put it politely, a massive douchebag. He never apologised to Rebecca. Never once apologises to her. But instead, a year or so later, he goes on TV to do an interview. And he says I was right about everything. He says, she's right. Cheating is a form of abuse. That's not what she was saying. The cheating is the least of the bad things you were doing, to be honest. It wasn't the cheating that was abusive, it was your entire behaviour towards her. You are an abuser because you were abusing her, not because you cheated on her one time. Or 15. Her friends thankfully point this out. "That's not what you were saying," says Theo. "He's derailing," Pill shakes her head. "F that guy." I watched Jonathan Ross say Rebecca like he knows me. "I stand in my house of plants filled with second-hand things and watch these two men in sharp suits speculate on how I must have felt last October, how I must still be feeling. He says things are different now because he's given up the booze." Derailment again, says Pearl. It's just ridiculous to me how many men want to speak for women in this way and not actually listen to their stories, and how they will still downplay how they've treated us time and time again. One of the things I did really enjoy throughout this book was how she talks a lot about how her self-image and her feelings of self-worth influenced why she stayed in that abusive relationship. But she also talks about how society in general kind of pushed her into that and made her think it was normal and put certain expectations on her. So, for example, so she talks about how she was really struggling with codependency. And she says, "I realise that they are all things that have, as a woman, been expected of me to some extent. How I've watched the generations before me be praised for playing the role of this kind, selfless woman. how women have been conditioned for codependency. In another part that's kind of only tangentially related, she talks about how she considered for a while if she might be bisexual. And she says, I wonder if I never considered it because where I grew up, everything felt binary. We were the last generation to be fed stuff that was so overtly patriarchal. Maybe I've never thought I'm sexually attracted to women because I've never fetishized them. Maybe that's because most images with tits or vulvas are targeted at men and a male gaze. A lot of it probably comes down to the fact I can't take pleasure in pictures of naked women. That's why I don't like porn, because I can't look at the woman without wondering what she's thinking, what got her there, whether she's enjoying it. I can't enjoy naked images of women because I can't see them as one-dimensional. I see myself in them and I care. To which one of her friends tells her, you need to get busy finding out what works for your body and learning how to use your damn words. Ultimately, Rebecca ends up coming away saying, I don't feel the need to define my sexual preferences tonight or any night. I'm stepping out unencumbered into a world that has never been more open for women, never held as much opportunity. And I just found that whole part of that chapter really, really empowering and fantastic. The last bit I want to end on is that there's this really interesting dichotomy between how she speaks about what she thinks love and relationships should be while she's still in the abusive relationship and what she learns about what a healthy, loving relationship is afterwards. So while she's still in it, she wrote, we're very fiery people. We'll always naturally spark because he's loud and I'm crazy and we're fiery. We're just fiery. We're Cathy and Heathcliff, Burton and Taylor, Sid and Nancy. We're akin to the most intoxicating wild love stories in history, riddled with hurt but raging with argumentative, screaming, don't leave me passion. What is love without passion? God, give me fiery over boring any day. And I think that's one of the things that happens when you're in an abusive relationship like this, is that you get kind of addicted to the highs and you're constantly trying to find them again. So these patterns of up and down become normal, and you think that's just what passion is, that's just what a relationship is, and you think, oh, anything else must be boring. And honestly, once you've left that kind of relationship, because you're not constantly chasing these big massive highs all the time, then you're not having lows that knock you down and then you're trying to get back up, because it's not a roller coaster anymore. Safe and healthy and happy and consistent can, while you're still hurting, can feel boring. But it's not. Once you've healed and once you've kind of come out the other side and once you're emotionally healthier, you realize that stability isn't boring. It's just very nice. It's a bit like, I've seen people compare it to, like, when people have substance abuse issues, you know, they're always looking for a bigger high. They get those lows when they come down and then they want the high again, but they want a higher high. And that's kind of what being in an abusive relationship's like. But when you're in a healthy relationship, you're kind of on one constant, nice high that isn't too much, but you also realize it's not boring either. You can still have passion and fun and excitement. It's just you don't have those horrific lows that are breaking you down in between. And while it might seem boring at first while you're still hurting, that kind of healthy stability is actually really, really nice. And it's what so many of us need. She definitely learns this by the end of the book, where, well, in the beginning she was kind of, once she'd first left, she was starting to question this, and she says, what if I have gotten love all wrong? What if I've been slaving away, reaching my arm in to prize words and feelings out of the mouth of someone who didn't have it in them? Not for me. I've been treating love like a noun, like a trophy I won ages ago and have left to gather dust in a cabinet. But every single one of those instances today, love has been a verb, an action. And not an action that requires Herculean effort either. Love is floating around serenely like feathers in this quiet space. And I think that's really lovely. She finally ends the book by saying that she's learned passion doesn't have to be dangerous. It can be safe. Adult relationships aren't a matter of urgency. Healthy doesn't mean unsexy, because there's nothing sexier than someone who has their shit together. I really love my life as a single person. Love the possibility in it. How the future looks like a series of options that are mine and mine alone. My life is so vibrant and exciting. I don't want to give up anything about it. But I know that I won't lose anything about my life by inviting this good person in. In fact, I think his presence could enhance it. I love me and I won't let anything happen to her. And for me, that's exactly how I felt when I met Kieran. I feel like he adds to my life. I've used the analogy before of like all the things in your life being like a good meal that you need to balance out with like, you know, your veggies and your proteins and all that sort of thing. And then once you've got all that set in life, if you still have room for a really nice tasty dessert, that's what a relationship is. And I just feel like it's a really nice, healthy way to leave the book and a really nice, healthy outlook to have. Isn't it, my little Kuberi pie? Mwah. My little demanding one. This one's getting ready to go out because I've been talking a long time, haven't I? Yes, you sure you have. But that's the thing. Love is about, it's an action. It's about showing someone you love them. It's about demonstrating love on a regular basis, but that shouldn't be a big effort. It shouldn't be difficult. It should come naturally and it should build... Ooh, careful, Angel Bean. And it should build you both up naturally. It shouldn't be this big, difficult thing to have a conversation without putting each other down or snipping at each other or, you know, or being judgmental of the other person. And if that's something that is difficult or a struggle, then maybe you need to reevaluate your relationship. I'll be honest that when I left Johnny, I was like, well, what if I don't find anyone that I have that passion and that connection and that chemistry with ever again? But that was just the damaged part of me talking. Like with Kieran, he's such a wonderful man, and there is the passion, there is the excitement. We do have, like, you know, like the other week when we were on holiday, we were both absolutely exhausted. We'd been walking all day, our feet hurt. We both just wanted to sleep. But at the same time, we ended up staying up till like 1, 2 a.m. because we just couldn't stop giggling and laughing and being silly. Every time one of us tried to sleep, the other would make the other laugh, and then we'd be up giggling forever again. And it's just, it's wonderful. And you really can get those highs and that passion and that excitement without having those horrible lows in between. And so I hope that's a kind of nice, uplifting little note to end on, and hopefully can give you all, I don't know, a bit of a nice happy ending to this video. I know it's been a long one. I know it's probably been a little bit tough to get through. It's been an emotional one for me to get through as well. And honestly, I've put off filming this for a little while because I didn't quite know how to approach it, how to keep my feelings in check while talking about what is a very, very difficult topic. But I think I've managed it. I think we've got there. And yeah, thank you for coming on this journey with me. So if you want to go read this for yourself, I would thoroughly, thoroughly recommend it. This is Why Did You Stay? A Memoir About Self-Worth by Rebecca Humphries. Fantastic book. And I really, really encourage you all to go out, read it for yourself and enjoy it. If you're interested, I will leave a link to it down in the video description below, just so you know they will be affiliate links, which means if you do end up buying a copy, I just get a few pence, which goes towards putting back into my channel and all of this good stuff, you know, like buying more books to chat about with you and camera equipment and all of that good stuff. Every little bit really helps, so I do appreciate it. If you want to keep up with the kind of like more personal side of my life, you can go follow me over on Instagram at Rachel Oates with a 0 instead of an O because my name was taken and I'm annoying like that. I post a lot of photography over there, pictures of my friends. I haven't painted in about 2 months now and I really miss it, but when I do painting, I post them over there as well. And of course, you'll see lots and lots of photos of this gorgeous little bean. There's you, isn't it? Yes, my little bean who's ready for her walkies. Isn't you right? Yes, yes, you're slipping out of my arms, you are. I love you. Sorry, she's been a little bit grumbly in the background of this today, but it's just one of the things that comes from filming in here while I'm still rearranging the office. But hopefully that's going to be finished in the next couple of days as well, so we'll be back in there for the next video, I hope. We'll see. But for now, thank you so much for your time and your patience. I really, really do appreciate you all. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and I will see you again really, really soon.